Hello, my friends, and welcome to Genealogy Gems podcast episode number 223. If you happen to catch an old episode of the TV series Buffy the Vampire Slayer, you may be surprised to spot Ben Affleck dribbling down a basketball court in the not-so-highly acclaimed role of basketball player number 10. And you might need to set your popcorn down and rewind while watching the TV series Monk from 2006 on Amazon Prime Video to confirm that indeed you did just see Jennifer Lawrence from the Hunger Games fame pull off a lion mascot head after a high school game in the infamous role of Mascot Girl. Or how about funny man Jack Black of School of Rock fame in the forgettable walk-on part of Taxi Driver on the iconic 1980s comedy, The Golden Girls. At some point, we are all bit players in somebody else's show. And that is no more true than it is with old home movies. Your friends, your neighbors, and even perfect strangers have likely at some point captured you or someone in your family in one of their own home movies. And the same is also true for your ancestors. As long as film has been around, the chances of someone in your family tree appearing in someone else's videos at some point in time is actually quite high. And think about it. When film or moving pictures came into being right around 1895, it had the capability of capturing someone born as early as, say, 1800. That's a lot of potential generations of your family. David Haas MD knows this better than most folks. He has experienced firsthand that any one of us may find ourselves quite by surprise as the keeper or even the archivist of film footage that connects to potentially hundreds, if not thousands, of other people and families. And there's a very good possibility that yours is one of those families.
We had films of our local swimming pool growing up in the 1960s, and there were lots of different people in this film. And one person was a young girl and her mother. So the young girl must have been about 3 or 4 years old, and her mother was walking her by the side of the pool and turned around and smiled. And years later, that young girl, both her mother and father died in a plane crash. So now, many, many years later, I guess within the past 10 years, this young girl comes across the video and sees her mother, sees her in a movie that she had never seen. And she was just brought to tears and was just so, I don't want to say devastated, but she was so, amazed and appreciative.
Your family could very well indeed be one that has been a bit player in somebody else's film, and you don't even know it. But that's okay, because thanks to technology, it's never been easier to find the celluloid that once lay sleeping in a stranger's attic. Online video can touch lives by reviving memories or enhancing them. The best place to start our story today is how I came to know David Haas. Now, I've been encouraging you, my listeners, through the podcast, my book, The Genealogist Google Toolbox, and in my in-person lectures, to turn to online video, and specifically YouTube in search of your family. Well, longtime listener Debbie Warner Anderson contacted me not too long ago to let me know that she had followed my suggestions, and with some very dramatic results.
I had interviewed my dad to get details of his memories and found the 2 YouTube links about the 1945 Macy's Parade that my dad went to and the video about W.C. Handy, who my dad remembered seeing. My dad was so tickled to see the YouTube videos to go with his memories. It gave my family members and my son a glimpse into my dad's memories. Thank you for the suggestions.
Well, I clicked the link that Debbie sent me, and it was to an article that she wrote on her blog called Debbie's Family Genealogy. The article was called Recording a Family Thanksgiving Tradition, and it described the discovery in detail, and it included the video. It's called Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, 1945. David Haas MD had uploaded this video to YouTube, and it's one of hundreds on his YouTube channel under his name, David Haas MD. You need only click the video and watch just a few moments to be mesmerized. The video comprised of old home movies is striking in its color quality, and you instantly feel yourself just falling back in time, pulled there even further by the haunting music that serves as the backdrop to this silent film. I was so taken by how this video sitting out there for free on YouTube fits so beautifully into Debbie's family history, helping to bring it just a bit more into focus. I sat and watched the Macy's Day Parade video all the way through, even though it didn't have any connection to my family history. It was so clear that it was carefully and thoughtfully restored and shared, and that it must have come from someone else's personal home movie collection. Well, clicking on the name of the person who uploaded any video on YouTube will bring you to their YouTube channel. Now, as soon as you sign in with a free Google account and you upload your first video, you have a free YouTube channel. It's called Creators Studio, and these days it sports an impressive collection of tools that anyone can use to create, enhance, and share videos. Many channels, when clicked, will have only one or maybe a handful of videos. Not the case with David's channel. It's difficult to scroll down the page long enough to get to the end of the impressive video list. So, where did all of these home movies come from? And what motivated him to invest the time to make them available on YouTube? Well, coming up right after this, you'll meet David Haas and hear the incredible story of the home movies. Okay, so I want to talk to you about your data for a minute. Whether you're new to genealogy or you've been at it for years, your genealogy software database is the backbone of your research. This is where you store the data that you're finding, and just as importantly, the sources where you found that data. Your database is the master file that you retain control of, and you can easily pass it on to future generations. So when I get asked about which software I use myself, the answer is Roots Magic. With Roots Magic Web Hints, I can see the record hints that are available on all the Genealogy Giants websites. Family Search, Find My Past, My Heritage, and Ancestry. And I love the variety of reporting tools that makes analyzing my data and setting up my research plans easy. And I know synchronization to your online tree is important to a lot of you. Roots Magic is the one that can synchronize with all the Genealogy Giants. So, plant your tree today in Roots Magic and watch it grow. You can get started at rootsmagic.com. David Haas posted a video on YouTube of the Macy's Day Parade back in 1945. Literally hundreds of people appear in the 4.5-minute film. The folks in the parade, the people lining the streets, and even the people watching from the fire escapes of the surrounding buildings. These films were created by William G. Whitman, Sr., a veteran of World War I. He made his way after the war as a bit of a jack of all trades, and that path eventually got the ball rolling that led to the home movies.
He was my grandfather on my mother's side. He spent pretty much his entire life in Brooklyn, New York, so a place where a lot of action was happening and lots of events, and a great place to be filming. And he did lots of things through his lifetime. For example, he worked at and eventually managed a coffee shop in Lower Manhattan at the footprint of what eventually became the World Trade Center. But during the Depression, he did lots of different things to try to make money, and he was really interested in shooting movies. So he took this up as a hobby and eventually developed it into a little mom and pop operation out of his basement in Brooklyn, in their flat in Brooklyn. So very early on, he became very involved and very, very talented at shooting home movies, and also did this to try to make some extra income by shooting weddings and other types of events in the New York area. He would shoot movies and he would develop his own film. So he set up a film developing machine in his basement, which I think that he built. And he actually bought a lathe to be able to make the rollers for the developing machine. My aunt described it to me, and she said it was this amazing contraption where the film would kind of roll through and be dipped in and out of various developing solutions. And on the end, you would have your film. So he would develop his own film. And then later on, they started mailing out blank film to people who wanted to get involved in shooting home movies. People would shoot their movies, and then they would ship the film back to his home, where he would develop the film and send it back to them. So he was quite an individual.
William and his wife, Catherine, and their 10-year-old daughter, Catherine, who is David's mother, can be found in the 1930 census, just as David said, living in Brooklyn, New York. At that time, William says he's a manager of a store, but by 1940, he has followed his passion and is proudly declaring that he works in photographic retail as a photo finisher. But it was as far back as the year that the Great Depression hit, 1929, that William was capturing his growing family on film.
The earliest ones go to 1929. Those are the movies of that started with my mother when she was 9 years old. I think the earliest movie we have, maybe of my mother when she was 9 years old, at their home on Quincy Street in Brooklyn. So they go way back, and then they span through my grandfather and later through my father, all the way through the mid-1970s. So it's quite a span of movies.
In the earliest of the home movies, which you can see on David's YouTube channel, William Whitman did what most of us do, take home movies of the people and the things that we love the most. In those films, David's mom, Catherine, clearly relishes being in front of her father's camera.
She used to talk mostly about her father. You know, she worshipped her father, and how he was like a little kid. He would go to the Coney Island, and he would be there riding the Cyclone all day, and the big roller coaster, and the fact that her father was really obsessed with Italian bicycle racing back in the early part of the century, and basically became a videographer for this big bicycle club in New York City, the Unione Sportiva Italiana. Even though he didn't ride bicycles, but he loved the bicycle racing, and he would film these events. And he would take my mother to Coney Island to watch the velodrome, the bicycle races in the velodrome. So my mother remembered all these things. But what was interesting, though, my mother always remembered things in a very sunny way. So whereas nothing bad ever happened. And years later, talking to my aunt, my aunt would say, you realize your mother always saw the good in everything and would never remember the bad events. But there were plenty of bad things. And so my aunt gave us kind of more of that perspective on things. And we learned this through the genealogy as my wife would look back, and you come across things where you realize that people went through these times in their lives where they were extremely challenging, when people were unemployed and people were homeless and people went through major challenges. So very much like the pictures we see on the internet, where people tend to post the most rosy possible pictures. Oftentimes, I think it's the same with the home movies. You get images, but you really have to dig deeper to kind of get the whole story and kind of behind the scenes.
So this phenomenon of capturing and sharing the rosiest version of ourselves is nothing new. And as genealogists, we are in the perfect position to leverage old movies like these and dig deeper for the rest of the story. And story is a definite running theme through William Whitman's films. You need only watch a few of them to see what a keen eye for composition and for telling stories that he had.
Yeah, I think that, if he could have done anything else in his life, he would have been a movie director or a movie producer. He just had an eye for composition and for telling stories. So for many of the movies that he did, they were not, many of them were candid, but for lots of them, they were things that were kind of composed and thought out and had storylines to them. So he really wanted these to tell stories. And I think part of that came from the time that he spent shooting weddings. When he would shoot weddings, he would do all the videography for the wedding, and then he would splice things together to be able to tell a story with the wedding. And then he would put title images at various places in the story to be able to put it together. And so it was just he loved storytelling and really had an eye for composition. And they would, at the end of the day, splice the films together in ways to make these stories. And it became kind of a family operation. So my grandfather did this, and then he got my mother involved, and my uncle and my aunt. They would all be involved in the splicing or helping when he would go shoot home movies. He would take my uncle with him, and ultimately my father. And it was funny, my aunt hated doing this. She hated splicing the film. And one of the things she hated the most was my grandfather loved model trains. He had a big model train set in his house, so he would film you may have come across this. There's films of these model trains back in the 1930s, I guess. And my aunt hated the model trains and hated the film of the model trains. So when she would do the splicing, whenever she came across the model train, she would cut it out and throw it on the floor. So
as you can see, the whole family was getting in the act. And Catherine's husband, David's father, joined in a big way, extending the generations of a great number of people ultimately captured in these home movies, as you will soon hear more about, and all of them were just covered by one family's home movies.
My grandfather was very active in shooting films and shooting weddings and things, and so when my father and mother got married, my father learned how to shoot video from my grandfather. So he would help with the shoot. So when they would go shoot weddings, for example, my grandfather would shoot and my father would go with him, and he would help with shooting the weddings. And so over time, my father, I think he learned everything he learned about how to shoot videos from my grandfather. So at some point transitioned to him really shooting a lot of these movies in New York and beyond. So my father became also very adept, and I think his eye for composition and many of those things came from that. So as I watch, there are certain images that I see in the films that are just so artistic. There are a couple that come to mind. There's one where you don't know where the image is yet, except it's my brother in the winter sitting on a sled on the snow, sitting on one of these, whatever they were called, the Fearless Flyer, whatever the sleds were, sitting in the snow, about to ride down a hill. And so my father has it focused on my brother, and then my brother starts going down the hill, and my father starts panning out to the bigger picture, and it's this beautiful, huge panoramic scene of Bear Mountain up in New York. And anybody from New York knows what Bear Mountain is. It's a Bear Mountain Lodge and the mountains and the people and this huge winter scene with hundreds of people. So it just goes from this very close-up to this expansive image. And another one, when my mother and my father, they were either courting or they were still courting. I don't believe they were married yet, but I could be wrong. And they were in upstate New York in Washingtonville. They're on a boat, and my mother is rowing, and then my father pans out, and you get this just beautiful image of the lake and the surroundings. So he really had a eye for artistic storytelling and composition.
As with so many genealogical tales, great treasure troves are often found with 3 parts deep digging and 1 part luck. In David's case, the path to the treasure starts with the family's kitchen refrigerator.
We knew that we had home movies because growing up, every once in a while, my father would show some of the videos. He would project them onto our refrigerator. We had, like most people did those days, you had a white refrigerator, which served as a refrigerator and a projection screen. So he would bring them out and he would show a few videos. And so we had seen a few videos that he would pull out. But as he got older, these were relegated to the closet. So the videos set up on the closet in our front room as we walked in the house. We knew they were there, but we never watched them. And my father would never bring them out to be watched. Ultimately, in 2010, when my parents passed away, my brother, my sister, and I went through our house to take care of the belongings, and as people do when their loved ones pass away. And I realized that the most precious thing we had in this whole house was a set of old home movies. These are absolutely priceless, but I really didn't know exactly what was on all of them. But I knew that they had images of our past and friends and family and places. And I knew that these went back to when we were younger, maybe a little bit earlier. And we also found a video canister up in my parents' bedroom that was labeled wedding. So we knew that was my parents' wedding, and we had never watched that. But my aunt, who was still alive, told us, well, it's nice that you found all those movies, but did you find the really old movies? Because these went back to 1940. And I said, well, what do you mean the old movies? She said, the ones of your mother when she was a child and me when I was a little baby. And sure enough, as we went through the house, we went into the basement. My wife said, David, you wouldn't believe what I just found. And there was a big box with reel upon reel of these ancient reels of film. And these were the largely 16 millimeter film that went back to the late 1920s. So we packed them all up and shipped them off and got them converted, and they were in amazing condition, despite being stored in a musty basement for decades.
David not only realized that these movies were a priceless find for his own family, but he soon discovered that they had a vast amount of treasure for many others.
It was absolutely amazing. It was amazing because not only were they videos of old home movies, but I think because of who my grandfather was and my father and the types of things they would film, I was just blown away by the diversity of material that was covered, the locations and the people and the events. And I was absolutely blown away. And one of the very, very first things that hit me was that there were so many people in these movies that were there, kind of recorded there for posterity. These were not only relatives, but friends and acquaintances and people who were from our town growing up in the suburbs of New York, people in the city. And it hit me that other people who knew the folks on these films had no idea that these films existed, had no idea that somewhere there were images of their friends who maybe had passed away, or their parents, or their aunts and uncles, or their relatives, or the towns that they grew up in. But it was really about the people more than anything. It was about realizing right away that there were people in these movies, the vast majority of whom I had no idea who they were, but I knew that other people out there would know who these folks were. And in many cases, it would bring fond memories, but in many cases, it would be very profound, seeing images of family and friends and relatives, from many years, if not many decades ago. So I actually felt a real moral obligation, and which became an obsession with figuring out how to make these movies available to other people to be able to see. The locations make them very interesting, like the Macy's Parade on Thanksgiving and many of the other events.
And that's the gold here. If we are all bit players in everyone else's show, and this show was happening in so many different locations, then there are a lot of bit players out there waiting to be found by their families too, right in David's films. While the films, of course, covered Brooklyn, where David's family lived, they branch out to Queens, New York, Ventnor, New Jersey, and as far away as San Francisco. The family history value here is immense. And if we as researchers can sometimes shift our focus from ancestors' names to locations, we could very possibly hit pay dirt and find old films online that include our family. Now, we'll circle back to the research in just a bit, but first, let's head back to Brooklyn, New York, and see where they go from here and the lives they touched.
I was born in Brooklyn, but at 6 months of age, my parents, as many people did who lived in the city, moved into the suburbs to try to give their kids a better life than living in the city. So while my parents lived in the city, my father would take us for summers to live up in the suburbs in the place called Mountain Lodge Park, which is in I believe it's in Orange County, New York. So he would spend summers going up into a little bit into upstate New York, and ultimately moved our family to the suburbs, this town called Suffern. I'm not sure how many people live there now. I remember as I was a little bit older, it had a population of, I think, 10,000.
It was in the town of Suffern, New York, that David's father shot quite a bit of footage, but there's plenty to be had in many different locations. Once he posted them on YouTube, the response was swift.
I've gotten countless comments and feedback, and it seems like every few days I get another message through YouTube about somebody watching one of the videos and having a comment about it. For example, what people seem to be looking at recently is our family was at the Yankee Stadium when Mickey Mantle hit his 500th home run, and so my father filmed all the events of our family there at the stadium and Mickey Mantle hitting his home run. And lots of people just got thrilled by that. There were a huge number of Mickey Mantle fans, but also people who were at the game and remembered that. And the fact that my father filmed things that didn't actually show up on the TV broadcasts. So we get lots of feedback in various ways. So there have been many that have been very poignant. And one thing I've learned, too, is that timeliness is important. Trying to get things out there as quickly as possible if you're going to do this, because people are not getting any younger, and for some of these home movies, people will end up passing away, and people who would really both love to see these movies, but also have perspectives and insights that you may miss. So one of the connections that I made through the home movies, which I just barely missed making the personal connection, was with my aunt, Margaret Whitman, who married and became Margaret Beauchamp. So she was my mother's younger sister. Lived in Brooklyn in the 1930s and 40s, and we have movies of my aunt. We called her Marky, of my Aunt Marky in Brooklyn with a bunch of her friends. And one of her friends, she said, "Oh, this is Charlie Russell." And he was a real character, and we did all these things together. So she and Charlie Russell were clearly very, very, very close back in the 1930s. So fast forward to, I guess, now 2 or 3 years ago, when my aunt is 89 years old, and she is on the verge of passing away. And lo and behold, I get a message from a Charlie Russell, who it turns out is my Aunt Margaret's friend growing up. And Charlie was just thrilled to hear from us, and we were talking, but unfortunately he made this connection literally a week after my aunt passed away. And I said to myself, if I could have made this connection 6 months earlier and connected Charlie with my aunt, both of whom had all their facilities, it would have been just so wonderful for both of them, because by that time all of their other friends from that era had passed away. There was a Little League game that my father filmed in Suffern again, and there was a young boy who struck out. And as he was walking off, one of the coaches kind of patted him on the butt, kind of saying, good try, good job. And then the game was over, and they're all kind of hugging each other, and because they won the game. And this young boy ended up seeing the film now, I guess, 50 years later. His father had passed away, not long after that Little League game. And here he was, seeing his father, who was his coach, encouraging him after he struck out. And again, he said he couldn't speak for hours. It was just amazing.
Used to be, you'd wait all week to walk the boardwalk, to walk the boardwalk. And the world moved real slow, just moment to moment of holding tight to all of those you loved. This world isn't made for me anymore, but I don't need much more. Just to hear you say you'll go and find your home. Go and find your home.
Most recently, there was a woman whose mother and father used to run the pony rides at Coney Island back in the 1950s, I guess it would have been 40s and 50s. And her grandfather owned the pony rides, and her mother and father worked there. And she started thinking just about her mother and parents and thinking, I wonder if there's anything about Coney Island I can find on the internet. So she started searching Coney Island, and she came across this video that my father had filmed at Coney Island. And she started watching it and was watching all these rides and all these different things. And she told me, I was thinking to myself, I wonder if the pony rides are going to be on here. And sure enough, at the end of the video are the pony rides and her mother and her father and her grandfather walking these ponies around with my brothers and my sister riding the ponies. And so she reached out to me and said it was the most wonderful experience to see movies of her parents, because she had not only no movies, but almost no pictures of her parents. So I went back through the films. I said, I'll try to find more footage and I'll try to update them. And I found a bunch more footage and made an entire video just of her grandfather and her parents at those pony rides. And through that, we've connected. And she said, if you're ever down in Florida, definitely come by and see us. This is the greatest gift I've had are these films of my parents and my grandfather. And regarding genealogy, she was able to fill me in on information about these pony rides that I had no idea about. I didn't know who these people were, and she gave me their family history about how they met and the relationships. And I was able to then put that into the video, which we were able to share online.
David's willingness to share his family's treasure trove of home movies put him in a unique and unexpected position to touch so many people's lives in truly meaningful ways. The only difference between him and other people who have even just a few spools of film is that he had a willingness to take action and share them. And along the way, he learned some important lessons about what makes film so distinct in its value. And it's those unique characteristics that told him even more about his own family.
What I've learned is that photographs are powerful, but there's nothing like moving images. There's nothing like actually seeing the film, because you see people's mannerisms and their expressions and how they interact. And it's funny, watching the movies of my mother when she was 9 years old, everybody in her family looked at it and said, oh my God, she has exactly the same mannerisms at 9 years old than she had when she was 90. The same movements, the same expressions, and it's really brings things home in a way that photographs just cannot do. And as this started, I did not inherently have any interest whatsoever in genealogy. My father had gone through a period where he was very, very obsessed with genealogy. So he spent a lot of time many, many years ago, pre-internet, trying to put together our family's genealogy, and he got so obsessed he started doing it for other families as well. But I was never interested in it. It was really, seeing these videos and then having to, at that point, be challenged with trying to figure out who are these people? How are they related? How does it all connect? That was what kind of drew me into this. And then from that, I had to go back and pull out all the genealogy that my father did and start trying to piece things together and connect the names and the faces and the dates. And it's still a work in progress.
It's a word so often associated with genealogy, obsessed. David's father became obsessed with it, and now David has become obsessed with processing and making available his cache of his father's and grandfather's home movies, which has in turn gloriously ensnared him in the world of genealogy. David hopes by sharing his story of how these videos have impacted and continue to impact the lives of strangers from around the world, it will inspire all of us who have a few or maybe many reels of old family movies to make it a priority to get them digitized and make them available. Our families and other unknown families are counting on us.
One thing that I'm really passionate about is that people who have home movies, if they can, they should really do their best to get them digitalized, to reach out to people to try to figure out how best to share these. Recently with my wife and her telling me that she had home movies from her side of the family, years ago I would have not thought a lot about that. But now, having gone through this experience, and it's really been transformative, I feel very passionately about getting my wife's movies, her family's movies, of her father when he was alive, and getting these converted. That's our next step, is to send those off and sharing those with my wife's family so that they can really forever see these movies and share them with their children, so they can be kind of passed down forever for generations.
So, just how do you do that? Well, coming up right after this, David Haas shares the process that he went through to digitize, enhance, and share his family's priceless home movies online. You can do it too. Our sponsor for this episode is MyHeritage. They have over 70 million members worldwide. Now, if you're serious about making connections in the country where your ancestors once lived, hands down, MyHeritage is the place that you want to be. I uploaded my family tree hoping for a breakthrough in my German family line, and that breakthrough happened really quickly. I received a message from a distant cousin in Germany, and that was my first international cousin contact. And MyHeritage has a unique and powerful search system. It's called Record Matches. Now, this constantly calls over 8 billion historical records for your family. It's also the only family history interface out there using semantic analysis to search newspaper articles, books, and other free text documents. So find out what MyHeritage can do to help you grow your family tree. Visit myheritage.com. It's free to get started, so there's really no reason to wait, and there are billions of reasons to try it out. Visit myheritage.com. We've all seen the commercial where they peer into the camera and they ask, "What's in your wallet?" Well, our question today is, what's in your closet? I've looked through my closets and it turns out I have several home movies that my grandmother shot on 8mm film, as well as I have a full box of VHS tapes from back when Bill and I got our first video camera right after we got married in the 1980s. There's no doubt about it. The process for digitizing and sharing your home movies can appear daunting at first glance. So that's why I asked my guest, David Haas MD, to share some specifics about his project so you can hear what you need to consider and some best practices from somebody who's already been through this on a pretty grand scale. So first of all, how many videos has he already shared?
I will make a rough guess and say 100, but I could be off by a lot. And I should point out what I decided to do is to edit it down into manageable, digestible segments. So each video is about 4 minutes long, 3 to 5 minutes long. And the reason I did that was several reasons. One is I figured people will not watch really, really long videos, and even to watch a video for 3 or 4 or 5 minutes is a lot. And Another aspect of it is I wanted to accompany it with music. So that's about the length of music, of songs. And it seemed like a 3, 4, 5-minute segment was enough to kind of tell a story and present kind of an aspect of it. For some of them, I've done much longer or shorter, but that's about how long it is. So for example, if I might have 30 or 40 minutes of film on a topic, but that might be digested down into 3 or 4 or 5 short segments of film. So there were lots of steps involved, but at one point I was shown that I should really have a web page to help people find these films. I knew nothing about web pages, but was able to develop a pretty rudimentary web page that now gives links to all the different movies and indexes them in ways I thought people might want to try to search them. So I index them by location. So if you're interested in Rhode Island, maybe there's a video in there, and there is, in Rhode Island. I also index them by year. And then probably the most important way I index them is by person. So every time that I've identified who a person is in a movie, I have an index to that person's name, and you can click on that name, and it will take you to that movie where that person is.
So the first step was to get the movies digitized. Now, it can be a pretty scary thought to send your precious movies off to some stranger somewhere. Through a bit of trial and error, David landed with a company who could do the job, and he has some great tips for sending them off and getting them back safely.
So these were amongst our most valuable possessions. So I definitely did not want to do anything that would put them at risk of being lost or damaged. So as a first step, I started trying to find out, how do you get this done? Who does this? So I searched online, and I learned that lots of places could potentially do this, but that there are probably not that many who can do it extremely well. So when I first started doing this, I found a local mom and pop shop that converts video to digital. So I brought over to them just a single reel and said, could you please convert this to digital? They did it. They gave it back to me, and it really did not look very good. And it was dark and it was grainy, and I said, you got to be able to do better than this. So I did some researching online, and I found a company out in Arizona, of all places, that seemed very, very good, was well rated, and so I ended up having them do the conversions from reels to digital. One thing from my medical background, I do medical research. We actually ship a lot of valuable samples from place to place throughout the country or to other parts of the world, and so I appreciate that you can ship things very carefully and have them be well tracked and protected. So I wasn't that nervous about shipping them to be converted. I have faith in FedEx and UPS and those types of operations. So I basically contacted this company. It's called Video Conversion Experts. They're in Chandler, Arizona. I have absolutely no financial or other connection with them other than sending them videos to be converted, but they've been extremely responsive and done great work. I contacted them. They have a very interactive webpage that allows you to choose what level of conversion you want to have done, whether you want the highest quality. They have a spectrum you can have done, what types of film you're going to send to them, whether they're VHS or 8mm or 60mm or Super 8, whatever you have. And you can actually estimate what it will cost to have it done on their webpage based on how much film you have and what types of film it is. And you coordinate with them, and then you pack them all up carefully, ship them to Arizona. I learned that it's best to ship so that it will arrive if it's really valuable, so it'll arrive the next day, because Arizona can get hot. You don't want your film sitting on a hot loading dock somewhere any longer than necessary. And shipped them out there, and within a matter of weeks, depending on how you want the data and digital images provided back, lo and behold, on your doorstep shows up a package with your digitalized film. So with reel-to-reel, what they do, which is great, is they take all your reel-to-reel film, they clean it. If it's on multiple different reels, they actually take it off the individual reels and put them all onto a single master reel. So you actually get the film back in better shape than you actually sent it to them in the first place. And then what I choose to get back are our hard drives actually have the digitalized movies on a hard drive so I can work with it. And then I also opt to have them send me back some DVD copies as well. And the other thing that they do is they go through the movies as they watch them and they try to optimize them. So they try to make them look as good as they can look. I imagine that much of this is done automatically through their equipment that they have. They have apparently extremely high-end equipment to do this. But the film comes back, I think, in as good a form as it can be. And this makes a big difference. Again, as I said, I sent off this test reel, and if I had gone with that, the quality would have been way inferior to what ultimately came from this. And to me, if you have the resources to do this, it's really worth the investment because this is priceless, it's timeless, and it's really worth doing.
So as you can hear, David really thought about the potential value of these films, and he set up a system for making it easier for visitors to find what they were looking for. In a case like his where he has such a volume of these 3 to 5 minute videos, this is a huge help to other researchers. But don't worry if having your own website isn't in your wheelhouse of skills. YouTube has a powerful search engine. It's called Google. And you can make your videos very easily searchable by simply including the details that pertain to a particular video in that video's description. And the description appears right below the video on YouTube. And since all of your videos are going to be on your YouTube channel, and we'll talk about that in just a second, all researchers will have to do to find a video is to go to your channel's homepage and type a name, place, event, or some other set of keywords in your channel's search box. And Google will search just your channel and retrieve only the videos that match the search terms. Now, if you want to see this in action, you can go to my YouTube channel at youtube.com/genealogygems. There's no space in between genealogy and gems. Or you could check out David's channel and try a search. You'll find the search box. It's not real obvious, but if you look under the name of the channel, you'll see several different tabs: Home, Videos, Playlists, Channels, Discussion, About, and then you'll see a magnifying glass. Click the magnifying glass, and that is your search box for that channel. Now, David doesn't have a vanity name for his channel like we have Genealogy Gems, which makes it very simple to search for. At least he doesn't yet. So the easiest way to find his channel is to go to youtube.com and search for David Haas MD. It's Haas. So David Haas MD, and his channel will be the first result that pops up. And of course, I will have a link directly to his channel in our show notes for this episode. Okay, so let's talk YouTube. David explains why he chose YouTube and how totally excited he was about using it. Not.
So up until that time, I had avoided social media and the internet like the plague. So my daughter kept telling me, Dad, you need to be on Facebook. You need to do this and that. And I said, Anna, I don't have time for that. And so I didn't even know what Facebook was. I had never watched a YouTube video, I don't think, in my whole life. So it took a long time to actually figure out how to share these for me. My first naive thought was what I should do is take these films and take them down to our public library in our town, Suffern, New York, and somehow post them there so that people could come to the library and watch the films. I had no idea that you could actually do this over the internet. Ultimately, my daughter, to make a long story short, convinced me that sharing things through the internet was really the way to go. And it was on a summer vacation that we took at the Jersey Shore when I had edited electronically. She taught me how to use this program called iMovie initially to be able to use the digital images and turn them into some kind of a story. So I was at vacation at the shore in the summer, and during that time, I edited up a video, the first one, I think, or one of the first, and it was called A Drive Through Suffern. It was my father had filmed in our hometown, driving through the streets of our town while he filmed through the front windshield of our Ford back then, driving from our house all the way downtown and through Main Street. So I posted this, and And in almost no time, there were 6,000 views of this film, and many of them were from my old town kids that I grew up with. And so I had no idea that this was possible. And so very quickly I went from knowing nothing about the internet to learning just enough to be dangerous and to be able to share these films.
Thank goodness for David's daughter, Anna Haas. Just think if these videos had only landed in one physical location, like a library, versus online, where they can reach so many more people. Now another generation of the Haas family has entered the picture to preserve the family's legacy and touch the lives of so many others. And it's Anna's inspiring music that provides the backdrop for the Macy's Day Parade video and several others.
My daughter Anna is an individual of many talents. She is a singer-songwriter. She directs music videos. She's a professional photographer. And when we discovered these home movies, I ultimately had them digitalized. And we had never seen these movies before, the vast majority of them. So once I got them digitalized, I had them on DVDs in our home here in Nashville, Tennessee. And my daughter was visiting, so we took out the computer and we started popping the discs into the computer. And my daughter saw for the first time her grandmother's wedding, which was amazingly filmed. It was like a theatrical production that went all the way from her meeting my father all the way through the ceremony and all the events around it. And my daughter was absolutely blown away. She had never seen anything like this, and she immediately was inspired to write this song called Find Your Home. And over time, she developed this into just an absolutely beautiful song that she put on her first album. And the spirit of the song, it's called Find Your Home. And what she saw from this, knowing her being so close to her grandmother and seeing her grandmother at a younger age, was if her grandmother could speak now, because by this time her grandmother had passed away, what would she tell her children? And what she would tell her children was, this world isn't made for me anymore. It's time for you to go find your home. So it was very, very powerful.
Used to be that nobody went into the city without their gloves on, without their gloves on. Used to be you'd wait all week to walk the boardwalk, to walk the boardwalk. And the world moved real slow, just moment to moment of holding tight to all of those you loved. This world isn't made for me anymore, but I don't need much more. Just to hear you say you'll go and find your home. Go and find your home. Used to be there was no hurry you'd been there, and the world was like that. You had what you had, and not just sepia or black and white. It was bright. This world isn't made for me anymore, but I don't need much more. Just to hear you say you'll go and find your home. This world isn't made for me, but I don't need much more. Just to hear you say you'll go and find your home. Go and find your home.
My mother's full name is Catherine Anna Haas, and my daughter, her name is Anna Catherine Haas. My daughter is my mother's namesake, and they share a love of music. My mother was used to teach piano on the side, and my daughter is a piano player and a singer, and they both have brilliant red hair, and they're both love life, love the world, and love people.
When you love people, you just can't justify keeping old home movies just for yourself. You can't, in good conscience, leave them in dusty boxes stuffed away in the back of closets and risk of deteriorating to dust. For the woman who saw her parents again in the swimming pool, to the man who felt the affection from a father long since gone, and for countless unnamed others, the action that David has taken to digitize, preserve, and share his home movies has been valuable beyond words. But now that he's got hundreds of videos out there, is that it? Is David done?
From this, my wife said, "Oh, do you realize that I have videos that my father used to shoot?" So on my wife's side of the family now, I'm in charge of getting those converted and figuring out how to get those shared and posted. Yes, there is more to do. I think I added up that all in all, we have from my father's and my grandfather's sets of video, we had about 10 hours worth of video, which is really quite a bit, considering that back in those days, shooting on 16 and 8 millimeter film, that film was expensive and took a lot to process. It's not like nowadays where you can just film everything that you want, on your phone. One thing I'll say is if you go to my webpage and or through the videos, there are links there, so feel free to reach out to me if you have questions. But I would say, don't be afraid to do it. Don't hesitate to do it, even if you don't have the skill set to do it. There are other people who are more than happy to kind of walk you through it and help make it happen. I'd be extremely encouraging of anybody to try to convert their old movies and share them as widely as they can, no matter how professionally done or how amateurly done they're going to be of value to folks.
If you would like to learn more about creating, preserving, and sharing family history videos of all types, old and new, visit the show notes webpage for this episode, number 223. I'll have links to David's website, our YouTube channels, Anna's beautiful website and music, and a rich collection of articles on this very topic on the Genealogy Gems website. To find the show notes in the Genealogy Gems app, simply swipe up on the media player and you'll find the notes right down below. Or head to genealogygems.com and in the menu go to Podcasts, Genealogy Gems Podcast, and then click on episode 223. And I really do encourage you to visit Dr. David Haas's website at haashomemovies.com and browse his phenomenal collection of home movies. You'll find inspiration, and you might just find an ancestor captured on film, because we are all bit players in somebody else's show. Thanks so much for listening, friend. I'll talk to you soon.